Once you complete by pulling that tail through, we're all set to add on the next mitered square. The way we're going to do that is we're going to add a square over here. So we will pick up stitches along this side so that our squares are joined together, and then we will knit, use the knitted cast on to add the bottom edge stitches because there's nothing down here to add onto. So we will pick up stitches, then use the knitted cast on to add stitches and begin our next mitered square. We are now going to pick stitches up along the left-hand side of our very first mitered square. We're paying attention to the orientation of this diagonal ridge. If you don't, and you keep picking up on random sides, this diagonal line could go this direction, it could go that direction. For the pattern instructions, all of the diagonal ridges go from the bottom right to the top left. But you can use that to your advantage, and you can have this ridge be an accent and a design element that goes different directions. But for our purposes, they're all going to go right to left. So to pick up stitches, we are going to, once we finish our first mitered square, and with the right side facing us, you can see the left side kind of has like a tuck where the decrease is forcing that little bit of extra fabric to this top side here. So this is the right side, bottom right to top left. We'll turn it 90 degrees, and we're picking up stitches along this edge. Where you pick up stitches will vary depending on the pattern. I utilize picking up between the ridges. So if we look, we can see ridge, ridge, ridge. You can see, there's a good example. So we see our garter ridges, and it does a little wiggle at the end, but the space is in between the ridges. If I get this close enough and it stays in focus, we're going to pick up just one leg of that knit stitch. So if I pull it open, you can see right here a nice knit stitch. We're going to pick up just half of it. Some will pick up this purl ridge instead. That can be a little hard to get into, but it can work just fine for you. But what we will do is we are going to pick up a total of 11 stitches down the side. And we have, let's count. We have a space here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the 10th one is picked up, if I can make sure it's focused, back in here, which is behind that central decrease is where I like to pick them up. So picking up 1, and count back this way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the last one, number 10, gets picked up down here. But because we need an odd number of stitches, you could cast on 11. But what I like to do is my 11th stitch, I like to kind of pick up just the little bit of the cast on edge. So this is the cast on edge here. So I just try to pick up half a stitch there on the edge of the cast on edge. And that kind of gives you a little bit of a nicer edge, because depending on how you pick up stitches, you can end up with a jog in all of your mitered squares, which you just sew your ends shut and it disappears once everything's joined together. But it's noticeable mostly on the edge. Our edges are of all of our squares are going to end up being covered up. So we can see that this is a little loose here using this knitted cast on, but that's going to make it easy to come back later and pick up stitches for our border that will be on that side. And then we will sew this side shut to the very last edge of the mitered squares on the other end of our cowl. So let's pick up some stitches. Taking this bright red yarn, tail goes this direction. And so let's pick up stitches. And by picking up stitches, it means to poke your needle through your existing work somewhere, somehow, and Pick up and knit is the term, but you'll often see just pick up stitches. So we're going to pick up and knit up a stitch. So pick up and knit means go from the front through to the back of the work and scoop up a stitch as if you just knitted a stitch, but we just made a stitch happen. Don't let your tail get too short. You want your tail long enough to be able to weave your ends in later. And I'm going to show a few different techniques for weaving in your ends as you go, so you don't have tons of ends at the end. But for now, we're just going to leave that tail hanging out there. So pick up one there, and between, it's a little harder to see when there's fewer stitches. It's a little bit easier to see here, but there's a purl ridge, there's a purl ridge. So we're going to pick up in between, poke through, I'm doing it through my camera, so I apologize. It's a little fiddly. Scoop up a stitch. Oh, here we go. And keep going. So spread it out. Go ahead and stretch it out. It's okay. It'll shrink up when it blocks. Scoop it up. We're picking up that horizontal leg there. So we see ridge and ridge. Spread that out. Scoop up that leg. We got 5 stitches, so we need 5 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's on the underside of that ridge, and then we'll pick up 1 more. My ridge kind of collapsed there for some reason. Oh, it just got pulled in a little tight. There it is. So that's the 10th stitch right there, and then 1 more down here. Picking up stitches sometimes works better throwing than picking too, but it's not quite as bad as that knitted cast on, so I kind of can just scoop up some stitches. Now some people will do a slip stitch at the beginning of every row, and then you end up with a defined slip stitch edge. If you like that and prefer that, go for it. It just creates a little bit bigger of a ridge on the back side of your work, which is not really a big issue, just a different design element. All right, so that should be stitch 10. 3, 6, 9, 10. So I pick up this last one, that little stitch right there. I'm going to pick that up as that last horizontal stitch. And bam. There. 11 stitches. Now we need to do 10 knitted stitches. So I picked up the last one there. Now we need to do a cast on of 10 stitches to go this direction. And to do it with the knitted cast on, we turn our work and we are going to knit into that last stitch, pull up and add on. So that's 12, 13, 14. See you when we get to 21. 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. We are now on a wrong side row. What do we do on our wrong side rows? Knit back across, but this time we are going to purl that central stitch. So knit to the middle, purl 1, knit to the end. So knit 10, purl 1, knit 10. I finished my wrong side row. Let's take a look at that central purled stitch. You can see we have a purl ridge, and since that stitch was purled, now we are going to have a central stockinette line up the middle of this mitered square. So let's weave in this end right here. Pick the red one. There we go. Because you see we got a couple ends. One thing about mitered squares, changing colors all the time, you're going to have lots of ends. But as I said, there's a few different ways to take care of these as you're going, so you don't actually have to get your needle out to sew anything together. A few you may want to help with the look of something, but otherwise I find this is a very easy way to do it. If you have ever done color work, you will tack down floats a lot of times, and this is essentially tacking down floats. I believe Stephen West does this one, and it's called the Weavin' Stephen, but I'm not positive. I haven't looked that up. I probably should. But this is what I do to weave in my ends as I go. So all we need to do is knit to the center 3 stitches. So while we're knitting, we're going to knit the first stitch, knit the second stitch, and I'm going to show you it with the 2-hand method, and then I'll show you a couple other ways. I take that tail up from underneath, wrap it around, wrap this around, and then take this back off. So we're just going to have the 1 stitch, and that just tacks down on the back side so that this, let's see if I can show it, maybe not yet. I'll do it a couple more times and then show it. So this is now anchored over here and not floating free at the edge. Knit a stitch. Now we're going to tack it down. So go in as if to knit, wrap it around, wrap that one around, take this one back off, pull up 1 stitch, then knit a stitch. Let's do it again. This is why you want to leave your tail a little bit long so that you have yarn to be able to do this with. So let's take a look at this. So you can't really see it too much, but every other one has this float going across, and the float is tacked down here and tacked down here. So float, tack down, float, tack down. Pretty cool. And now our tail, you'll see, it's over here. There it is. Okay, lots of strings. Come on now. See, your tail is now over here and tacked in versus over here. It's a great way to just keep it going as you work. Sometimes people will also just twist it around every stitch and just do a twist. I've seen that. But the way I do it, like I said, is just this technique. So let me see if I can do it with both in the right hand. So we got our working yarn and our tail. They're held both in the right hand. Kind of however it makes it work for you. So let's go ahead and tack it down. So take the short one, wrap it around, wrap the long one around with the working yarn, and then take this one back off, and it allows you to pull up a stitch. If you're going to want them both in your left hand, because it's just like I said, just like tacking down floats in Fair Isle. Except it gets shorter. Some people will hold these up here. So this might be actually harder, trying to tension them both when it gets shorter. But you can scoop under to pick up a stitch, and then you can knit over to pick up a stitch. So you're like going under and scooping up is how you're collecting it. That didn't show a very good one. So that's how you can weave your end in as you go. But now we're to our center 3 stitches. So practice that. Like I said, maybe look up the Weavin' Stephen, not quite sure, or the twist one where you just every time you twist your yarn around as you go. That's it, just one twist around. And then that just locks you in. So you can see that that's being pinned up against. And it's woven in. All right, central double decrease. Insert needle into 2 as if to knit. We're going to knit that one. Sometimes you might knit with your tail, so just be conscious of that. I do wait till later once I've gone for a bit to trim my tail, but if you want to go ahead and trim it, you can. Knit, pass 2 stitches over, and pull up 1 stitch. Okay. Now finish knitting that row, and then we'll come on back. finished my right side row, we are going to knit to the central stitch, purl it, knit to the other side, and then I'll see you again. I have completed that next wrong side row. Let's take a look at our ridge forming. So you can see garter on one side, garter on the other, and a nice pleasant stockinette ridge up the middle. Let's work until there's 3 stitches left, just like we did on that first one, working knit till 3 stitches in the middle, central double decrease, knit to the other end, wrong side rows, knit until the middle stitch, purl, knit until the other end. We are down to our last 3 stitches. I've worked my last wrong side row, and look at a nice raised stockinette ridge down the center. Compare that to the garter. Both look really nice. One is way more distinctive than the others, a little bit subtle, but still there. And we have 2 squares, so we'll finish with our last central double decrease. Knit 2, slip 2 as if to knit, slipping them together, knit, pass 2 stitches over, and done. Voila. Cut, pull the tail through there, and we are ready to move on to square number 3.